Buongiorno.
Good morning, everybody. We are in streaming from the library of the Historic Archive of La Biennale di Venezia for the presentation of the 81st International Film Festival of Venice that will take place in Lido from the 28th of August to the 7th of September. We are here for the presentation of this festival. I am Paolo Lughi, the person in charge of the press office for Biennale Cinema. To my left, I have Alberto Barbera, the artistic director of the International Film Festival of Venice, who will shortly describe the program of the film festival with the list of the films we will see there. But I invite here on stage the president of La Biennale di Venezia, Pietrangelo Buttafuoco. The film festival, for the fact of being part of the Biennale of figurative art, is the most important event for the world of cinema. This is what was written in 1932 on the International Film Festival of La Biennale di Venezia by an important Venetian cinema critic, Francesco Pasinetti. And we can certainly say that this point of strength stressed by Pasinetti, that is to say, the fact that the film festival is part of La Biennale, the international exhibition of visual art in particular, has remained such over the years to stress what for 90 years up to date requires a great effort, that is to say, qualifying the works of cinema as art, and it is right, and it is important, and it is fundamental to remember this, that cinema is an industry. La Biennale, which is the home to contemporary arts, in these days is staging the best available for the audience, available for our time to understand the spirit of the time that is mirrored by La Biennale with the fantastic dance performances you can go and see in these days with the dance festival directed by Sir Wayne McGregor, and after a theatre festival directed by Ricci and Forte, and that will be followed by the music festival directed by Lucia Ronchetti in October. It is right, I think, to stress that with all these disciplines intertwining and supporting one another, we also have the beautiful international visual art exhibition directed and curated by Adriano Pedrosa. The separations among these disciplines are easily overcome, and cinema, 7th or 10th art, in its history has never excluded the other arts. Quite the reverse. It has contributed to their renovation with a dual result, which is witnessed by this company of silent servants as books were defined in the past. It is the most studied department in this historical archive. The strength of this film festival is Venice itself, with its capacity to establish a dialogue with the world, with the farthest away countries, and this capacity to look far away, to follow a perspective, has enabled the Film Festival of Venice in 1955 to give back, like Longhi and Caravaggio, did, as we usually do with unexpected discoveries, the Rushmore by Akira Kurosawa. And as cinema, the screen, can be everywhere in the world, what is discovered here is given back to the definition of art and embodies the efficient work carried out by the film festival. It has always done so from its first year with Italian cinema, and we can think of the image given by Federico Fellini of the Sala Grande. For each director, that Sala Grande is like a final exam at secondary school, maturità. And then there is the effort in interpreting times, in being able to foresee what will come. And this year in Lazzaretto, we will have a virtual reality project connected to a film festival. And another pillar of this film festival is its very special audience. Audience that follows numerous this event, and the number of Venetian citizens who are regularly following this event, as well as the professionals who come from all over the world, confirming the relationship between Venice and cinema in theaters. Because we also have this pleasure of seeing a movie in a theater, giving back part of our reality to what is our dream, that is love, a thrust towards the cinema. And therefore, I recommend the audience, wherever they may be, participate, be present physically with your emotions, being present because that industry perceives and captures in images and in sound and in listening the very meaning, the very sense of something that is vigor, strength, creativity, poetry. And this is really what is important in this film festival. Every year, overcoming the different challenges, every year it is able to face and give back itself to its best. For all of you who are present here today, to those who are listening to us online, I invite you to start this journey made of wandering vessels, as Mario Sgalambro would say. This journey made of cinema, arts, different realities. This journey starts from Venice. Venice that has always been in advance as against the rest of the world. This is the oldest film festival in the world, and it mirrors the water fascination. It is able to renovate itself, maintaining its unique nature, and half a century later, still directors, authors, actors meet here to present their vision of the world. And this film festival that was strongly desired in 1942 to tell about modern times has the power to become an oracle and to read reality and capture everything that comes and that will come in the future. So I am sure that in Venice 81, the movies, all of them, all of those that have been selected, besides images, besides the screen, will give a meaning, will give a sense to our desire for knowledge, to our desire to be surprised. Alberto is like going back to the alphabet of stars. with the beautiful image Leonardo Sciascia found at a market and decided to make a book about that, to the genius who wrote about this alphabet of the stars, l'alfabeto delle stelle. A book, a novel that brings us back to this need, this desire to be present in contemporary times, but keeping our feet on the clouds of imagination and fantasy. I want to thank the different institutions, the Ministry for Culture, Gennaro San Giuliano, the City of Venice, the region, Veneto, the Superintendency for Archaeology, Landscape, and the Lagoon of Venice. And our gratitude goes to all those who contribute to the success of this film festival. Our gratitude goes to the sponsors supporting the 81st International Film Festival of Venice, main sponsor Cartier, Armani, Campari, Vivendi, Lexus, the Consorzio Tutela del Vino Conegliano Valdobbiadene, Telios, Major Events Media, Canon, Radio Italia. We want to thank RAI, main broadcaster of this film festival and media partner of La Biennale di Venezia. And always our thanks to the colleagues of La Fondazione La Biennale di Venezia, to the staff of La Biennale di Venezia. They are always present. They are always ready to support us with the civil responsibility, with the political and poetic responsibility of providing us with this effort, the responsibility of bringing forward beauty. Thank you all, and thank you, Alberto.
Grazie Presidente.
Ma scusami.
Prego Alberto.
Alberto, you have the floor. I want to thank President Buttafuoco for the passionate speech. Thank you for honoring me with his trust and for the support he has given me in these long months of preparation of the film festival. Being able to work freely and being able to share the most important strategic choices and the solution to the problems that always exist is a great privilege for which I'm truly grateful. Good morning to all of you, and welcome to this usual presentation of the program of the Venice International Film Festival. Many movies have already anticipated and announced by the media and social networks, but as you will see, there will be many surprises, unexpected novelties. I won't be short. I will not manage to be short. And after 9 months of hard work for the selection of the movies, continuous hard work, the movies we have selected are like our children. So I would talk about them for hours. I will try and be as short as possible. Some programs have already been announced. The program of Venice Immersive, the president referred to, 26 projects in competition, 30 out-of-competition projects, 7 projects developed as part of Biennale College Cinema Immersive. Let me say with a bit of legitimate pride that no other event in the world dedicated to virtual reality exceeds the importance and prestige of our appointment, which takes place entirely on the island of Lazzaretto with a unique setup. I would like to take this opportunity to thank Michel Reyac and Liz Rosenthal for their great work, the work they've done this year to ensure that the most beautiful and important products of the moment are selected. Let us now come to the sections of the festival to be announced. Let us start with Biennale College Cinema. 4 films have been produced this year as part of the 12th edition of the Biennale College Cinema. My Birthday, Il mio compleanno, by Christian Filippi, The Fisherman by Zoe Martinson, a co-production of US-Ghana, Honeymoon by Zana Ozirna from Ukraine, and January 2 by Sophie Zilagi from Hungary. We will screen the movies starting from Thursday, the 29th of August, until Sunday, the 1st of September. The second section we are going to describe today is Venice Classics, documentaries on cinema. The 18 restored classics were already announced a few days ago. These are the documentaries on cinema. Miyazaki, Esprit de la Nature, by Léo Favier. You don't need a long presentation for this portrait of the world's greatest and most beloved animated film artist. And then there is a movie from Armenia, a tribute to the immense Armenian filmmaker 100 years after his birth, who was opposed in life for his films that are extraneous to the precepts of socialist realism. I Will Revenge This World with Love, Parajanov, is by Zara Gian. The other documentary is dedicated to Jean-Pierre Léaud. You do not need any presentation. He's the alter ego of François Truffaut, the protagonist of Unforgettable Films, one of most beloved faces of the Nouvelle Vague. And then there is From Darkness to Light by a couple of directors, Michael Lurie and Eric Fiedler, a production of Germany and Australia. It is a documentary on an incredible movie by Jerry Lewis, the cursed film about the clown of Auschwitz. A movie that is somewhere in an archive. The two directors found some reels of this movie, and we will see this in the documentary that collects the direct testimony of numerous people who worked with Jerry Lewis on the film and that never saw the light of the day. A movie that has always been discussed a lot, but that nobody has ever seen and that we will never be seen, probably. And then we have another portrait, Carlo Mazzacurati, 10 years after his death, a beloved director, closely connected with the film festival, by Enzo Montenapoleone and Mario Canale. Nothing more to add. And then we have Chain Reaction by Alexander Philippe, that is an essay in images on a famous movie, Taube, one of the most beloved horrors, 50 years after its creation. Taube Hopper's The Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and it includes testimonies from great admirers, such as Mika Takashi and Stephen King. Maron Returns to Beirut is a documentary by Feyrouz Serral, portraying the French-Lebanese director Maroun Baghdadi 30 years after his death, and it is at the same time the portrait of a country and a city, Beirut, which are reflected in his cinema. Volonté, L'uomo dai mille volti by Francesco Zippo. Volonté was one of the greatest actors in Italy. He died very young on the set of a film by Angelopoulos. He never completed. And the last documentary on cinema is Constellación Portabella by Claudio Zulian, Spain, is a portrait of Pere Portabella, one of the most important Spanish directors, politically engaged and active both before and after the Franco regime, perhaps not as well known in Italy as he deserves. But he's a cult director. Orizzonti, that includes a couple of subsections. The first is Orizzonti short films that has already been announced. I will not list the movies. I will just stress the movie F2, Lo stupore del mondo, The Amazement of the World, a very short movie by Alessandro Rack, the Napolitan author of animated movies dedicated to Ferdinand II of Bourbon, King of the Two Sicilies. And then we have Orizzonti feature films. The opening movie is Nonostante by Valerio Mastandrea, the second work by one of the most popular actors in Italian cinema, an original and courageous film which speaks of death and love in an unusual way, suspended between the lightness of an apparent narrative simplicity and the gravity of a reflection on the mystery of the passage from life to what comes after. Quiet Life is the very welcome return of a director who had been discovered and launched somehow and awarded in competition in Venice, Alexandros Avranas, who had won the prize for the Best Director and Best Leading Actor with his first movie, Miss Violence, in 2013. The making of this third film took 5 years of work and deals with a phenomenon about which very little is known, an increasingly frequent syndrome, especially among immigrants, which affects children, forcing them into a sort of apathy that completely isolates them from the rest of the world. They reject the reality and isolate from the world, remaining in a catatonic and apathic status. Mon Inséparable, the first movie by a young French director, Anne-Sophie Bailly. In its cast, we have Laure Calamy, who was in Venice many times, and she got an award with previous movies in the Orizzonti section, a single mother struggling with the disabled son who wants to marry a girl with similar disabilities. The beauty of the movie is in the fact that Bailly avoids all the sentimental and rhetorical traps that often undermine the credibility of this type of film and subject. Aisha, the second movie by a director we know from Tunisia, Mehdi Barzaoui. He was in competition in Venice in 2019, and had also won the Best Actor award for a leading role. It is a great pleasure to have him back with us, with the story of a woman that her path to emancipation, from family exploitation to violent and corrupt Tunis. Happy holidays. I cannot pronounce the title in Arabic, by Standard Kopti, one of the most important Palestinian directors, although he is Israeli national. It is a kind of Secret and Lies in an Arab family grappling with the contradictions of Israeli society. Here, too, we have a conflict, not an armed conflict as the current one, but just as apparently reducible, with the two communities entrenched around their irreconcilable values and tradition. The first Italian movie, Famiglia, by Francesco Constabile. His first film was at the Berlin Film Festival and went on to win numerous awards. Constabile reconstructs the authentic story of a family victim of a violent father, served by a great cast: Francesco Di Gheghi, Barbara Ronchi, Francesco Di Leva, and many others. And then we have the first of two Turkish debut movies. The first is One of Those Days When Hammer Dies, directed, written, and interpreted by the director Murat Firatoglu. It is a debut movie that is totally unexpected. We discovered it during the last few days of our selection. It is demonstration of the fact that authentically independent cinema is not dead. It still exists with the industry of cinema. This is a debut, another debut film coming from the U.S., directed by Sarah Fleetland, a choreographer and author and director, author of many multimedia installations that often have the female body at the center. This is also the case with this narrative feature film, the story of an elderly lady struggling with the conflict between persistent desires and her fading memory. Then we have Marco, a Spanish movie directed by two directors, John Garagno and Aitor Reggi. The story of the film, absolutely authentic, was told a few years ago in a book by Javier Cercas, a 90-year-old from Barcelona, an anti-Franco militant, secretary of the Anarchist Union, and later president of the Spanish Association of Survivors of the Nazi death camps. Too bad that everything was invented. The advantage of the film compared to the novel, the advantage of the film is that it can count on an extraordinary performer, Eduard Fernandez. You will see it is really worth seeing. Carissa is another debut film from South Africa, a cinema that is lacking new projects. We have two directors, Jason Jacobs and Devon Delmar. They are the promise of this cinema. Carissa is the protagonist of the movie. A girl who lives in a small community of a village lost in the mountains, and she embodies the new African generation at the crossroads between tradition and modernity. Wishing on a Star is the coming back to Venice by Peter Kerekes, who was with us in competition in Orizzonti in 2021, and he had been awarded a prize, 107 Mothers. The new film with which he returns to Venice is entirely set in Italy and is the portrait of an astrologer who promises customers that she will be able to change her destiny if they agree to take a trip on her birthday. And usually she sends them in the most remote places on planet Earth. It is a curious film. And then we have Mistress Dispeller, a curious movie as well, a Chinese-American director, Elizabeth Law. We are in the context of a documentary reconstructing one of the many new jobs of contemporary China, unthinkable in Italy. A lady with great experience in man-woman relationships is hired by betrayed wives to convince her lovers to leave their husbands with good manners, and almost always succeeding. And then we have a Romanian movie, The New Year That Never Came, a choral story, 6 parallel stories set on the eve of Ceausescu's fall to compose a tragicomic fresco of Romania of those years, bordering on the absurd and grotesque. From Nepal, we have the second movie by the director Deepak Raunyar, who had been in Orizzonti in 2016 with White Sun. This movie is inspired by true events and is the story of, it is structured as a thriller, it is the story of an investigation into a child abduction conducted by an unusual lesbian policewoman who calls herself Sir and not Madam. The subtext, not too hidden behind the development of an investigative thriller, are the contradictions of a society that wants to be progressive, but in which the women's question has to deal with the legacies of wealth, ethnicity, and patriarchy. From Israel, we have a movie of Dogs and Men, which is almost an instant movie. Danny Rosenberg, the director, was in the international festival circuit with his third feature film, Vanishing Soldier. Maybe you remember that. This movie instead was shot shortly after the tragic events of the Hamas terrorist attack on the 7th of October, 2023. The film follows a 16-year-old girl who returns to her kibbutz, one of the kibbutz that was devastated by the terrorists, in search of a missing dog and her kidnapped mother. The pilgrimage through the devastation and the meetings with some survivors relate the horror of the terrorist attack, but also the other horror, which is produced a short distance beyond the fence wall that separates the kibbutz from Gaza under Israeli bombing. The prolific independent filmmaker, American filmmaker Alex Roperi, dedicates his new documentary to a cult American rock band, The Pavements. Probably not all of you know about them. I didn't know them. I discovered them with the movie. The most influential group that emerged from the Californian underground in the 1990s. After separating and reuniting a couple of times, the Pavements are still active and are expected to accompany the film on the occasion of its world screening in Venice, interrupting their tour. Happy End is the first narrative feature film by a director we know, Neo Sora. He was in Venice last year with a concert film dedicated to his father, Ruichi Sakamoto. It is a story of coming of age in a relatively near future, in the last months of the school year in a high school in Kobe. Science fiction, barely mentioned, is the pretext to contrast the spirit of independence of the children and the repressive systems of the schooling institutions in Japan. L'Attachement is the second French movie of the Orizzonti selection by Karine Tardieu, a beautiful cast, an important cast, with the star Valeria Bruni Tedeschi as a 50-year-old woman who leads a lonely life, ending up taking an interest in the two children of a neighbor who has lost his wife. In the film, we also have Pio Marmai and Raphaël Quenard. We have started to know and appreciate as one of Quentin Dupieux's fetish actors. The last movie in the Orizzonti section is 19 by Giovanni Tortorici. It is also a coming-of-age film with a clear gap compared to the so-called young Italian cinema. The protagonist, who interpreted by a new actor, an emerging debut actor, struggles to find his place in today's world and seeks comfort in medieval literature and early music, and is the non-trivial emblem of a denunciation of the cultural and social drift of these times. This is Orizzonti competition, and then we have Orizzonti Extra, fourth edition of this competition, a very successful competition. It awards a prize decreed by the public, and it is supported by Almani Beauty. The screenings are at night in Sala Giardina, and they are preceded and followed by a meeting with the authors conducted by Chiara Tagliaferri, and the votes expressed by the public will contribute to determine the Spectators' Award. Let's start with the opening film without respecting the usual alphabetical order. We announced it yesterday. It is September 5, directed by Tim Feldbaum, Germany. More than a film reconstructed the massacre at the Munich Olympics in 1972, a film already done by Spielberg. It is the meticulous reconstruction of how the whole story was experienced live for the first time in the history of television through the services of an American sports network forced to cover the event for the news. At a time when the images were broadcast by all the televisions of the world, at a time when outdoor filming was still carried out with 16mm cameras and therefore required to be developed and printed to be aired, in order to air 20 minutes later the images that were telling what was happening. A film with a great tension. It is almost a thriller, and instead it is the narration of a tragic event, a great cast, Peter Sarsgaard, John Magaro, and Ben Chaplin, among others. Again, in alphabetical order, one of the two Italian movies in the section is Vittoria, the new movie by Alessandro Cassigoli and Casey Kaufman, the fourth film of this couple of authors that continue to work on the mixture of documentary cinema and narrative cinema to reconstruct, with the authentic protagonist, the true story of a Neapolitan couple who wants to adopt a girl despite already having 3 sons. Among the producers, there is also Nanni Moretti. We have then Le Mohicans, the second movie by a Corsica French director, Frédéric Farrucci, who sets the story of a shepherd who rebels against the pressure of the local mafia on his island to take possession of his land for the purpose of building speculation. The protagonist is an actor who is chased by bandits and police, Alexis Manenti, one of the hottest protagonists of French cinema. From Egypt, we have a movie, Seeking Heaven for Mr. Rambo, by Khaled Mansour. He was noticed in the past for a number of short movies. A tale of ordinary abuse and revenge set in Cairo that is almost always unrecognizable. At the center, a boy abandoned by his father during childhood who pours all of his love on his mother and on his dog Rambo, whom he would like to emigrate to guarantee him a more comfortable future. Melodrama, comedy, and social criticism in the form of a satire. The second Italian movie, In Orizzonti Extra, is the film by Paola Randi, La storia di Frank e della Nida, an important difference with the previous movies and also different from the rest of the Italian cinema in general we know, in which she subverts conventions and stereotypes. He does so by giving life to a pop language soon on his irregular, eccentric teenagers with a strong charge of humanity destined to conquer the viewers. Really a nice surprise, I would say. And then we have a debut film by an Iranian director, expatriate for political reasons. He lives in Germany, Nader Saivar, and he was for a long time an assistant to Jafar Panahi, who contributed to the screenplay by leaving an evident imprint on this story of women who do not bow to the hypocrisy of the regime they are fighting against. After Party is the debut first feature. It comes from the Czech Republic, a beautiful film about the loss of innocence, told from the point of view of a young girl who is the victim of an unscrupulous and irresponsible father, but also the portrait of a generation that was abandoned to itself, but capable of finding the strength to react and grow. I think I skipped a movie. Here it is. We made some confusion. Edge of Night, the second Turkish movie I was telling you about, a debut film. It had a different title, Brothers, and then they decided to change the title. The whole dramatic structure is based on the contrast between two brothers who react differently to the suffocating military discipline, the legacy of a father who is that is the metaphor of the crushing weight of tradition that strangles this country. King Ivory is an independent American production. John Schwab is a director that we have been following for some time, even if we had never invited him to Venice. We did it with this genre film, which seems to us the most accomplished. The somewhat labyrinthine story stages the intersection between Mexican gangs, Indians, common criminals, and local police that are specific to Oklahoma, while recalling certain novels by Don Winslow, many of you certainly know. This is the Orizzonti section. Let us start with the out of competition section. Some subsections also here. Special screenings. Giacomo Leopardi, Il poeta dell'infinito, The Poet of Infinity, a film divided in 4 parts. It will be screened on Rai Uno, a production by Rai Fiction. After Martone, also Sergio Rubini measures himself against the figure of one of the greatest Italian philosophers and poets, an Italian television miniseries that involved a large production investment by Rai Fiction, whose strengths are the accurate historical reconstruction and the important cast, composed among others by Leonardo Maltese, Alessio Boni, Valentina Cervi, and Alessandro Preziosi. Master and Commander, the movie we chose to honor the Golden Lion for Lifetime Achievement to Peter Weir. We have chosen one of his many beautiful films, not only because this is beautiful, but perhaps because it is perhaps one of the less known and less celebrated, although it deserves for its exceptional cast, Russell Crowe and Paul Bettany, who clash and discuss on a military ship during the years of Napoleon. And then there is a short film, a very short film, 7 minutes, the latest production by a friend of ours, Nicolas Winding Refn. It demonstrates that even with a commercial, you can make great cinema. The short film will be screened before the restoration of The Pusher, the director's first film that has become a cult film and is included in Venezia Classici. Second subsection of Out of Competition series. I have to make a small introduction to this section, which has grown a lot compared to a few years ago. As I wrote in the introduction, we have a presented 1-2 series with just a few episodes. And as I wrote in the introduction that you will find in the general catalog of the festival, it is time to acknowledge that one of the transformations that cinema is undergoing concerns durations. Alongside increasingly short films intended for social media, TikTok and YouTube above all, many film authors are tempted by the possibility of experimenting with the length offered by series. The four we have chosen are proof that we are faced with a stylistic and formal approach of irrefutable cinematic imprint, to the point of being able to say that they are actually long or very long films which have nothing to do with the language and convention of television series. As I was saying, they have nothing to share with the language and conventions of TV series, and this is precisely the case of the four selected series. They are very long, 5.5 hours for one series, 8 hours for another. It will be a real effort for the viewers at the film festival, but we decided to launch this experiment to support the attempt of the festival in anticipating the most significant changes that take place in the world of cinema. The four series are the series by Alfonso Cuarón for Apple, Disclaimer, 7 chapters. They will be presented in 2 days. For Cuarón, we will have the first 4 chapters in the first day and the third chapters in the second day. The second series, 10 episodes by Rodrigo Sorogoyen, a Spanish, the most important Spanish director after Almodóvar, Los Años Nuevos. It tells about a relationship between a man and a woman whom we see in 10 consecutive years at New Year's Eve. Then we have a slightly shorter series, 7 episodes by Thomas Winterberg, who doesn't need to be introduced. The title of the series is Families Like Ours, produced by Zentropa, Studio Canal, Canal Plus, and TV2 Denmark. The story of science fiction, dystopic science fiction, because of climate change, Denmark will be totally submerged by the water, and the population will have to emigrate abroad. The last series, 8 episodes, M, il figlio del secolo, the son of the century, taken from the first novel by Antonio Scurati, directed by Joe Wright for a committing production, also financially and economically, by Sky and Fremantle. You will all be curious to see what a British director has done of this story. The story of Italy from the coming to power of Mussolini until the killing of Matteotti. Out of competition, non-fiction, the distinction between fiction and non-fiction is increasingly arbitrary and relative, but we still maintain this distinction. The first documentary we present is Apocalypse en los Trópicos, directed by Petra Costa, a Brazilian director. It is the 4th feature film dedicated by Petra to the dizzying events of the last few years in the history of the country. Here, the investigation, organized in 8 chapters, follows Bolsonaro's overbearing rise to power, favored by the equally rapid and growing political influence of religious fundamentalist movements. And then we have a triptych that lasts a little more than 3 hours by two important documentary filmmakers, Massimo Danolfi and Marina Parenti. The title is quite explanatory, Bestiari, Erbari, Lapidari. The first two chapters have an encyclopedic and classificatory structure, as in the human sciences, to which they refer for the animal and plant worlds. In the third and final chapter, instead, it is emotion that takes over the material and detached approach to the previous two. You will discover the subject watching the movie. Why war? I hesitated for a long time whether to place Amos Gitai's film among documentary or fiction works, since he consciously mixes the two languages. But what matters in his latest work is the question the director asks himself, starting with the exchange of letters between Einstein and Sigmund Freud that dates back to the 1930s. A question that is more relevant today than ever in the face of the insane multiplication of conflicts in every part of the world, which tells us how important and necessary this film is. 2073 by Asif Kapadia asks questions. What will the world be like in 50 years if you look around? Fiction and reality are also mixed in this film. A dystopian science fiction film frames an impressive editing of authentic images that show how that comes from televisions and social media all over the world, and show how the world is rapidly plunging into a vortex of lies, authoritarianism, violence, and climate catastrophe. Not a happy movie, but it is worth being afraid of what is happening. And then a beautiful documentary, one-to-one, John and Yoko. John is John Lennon and Yoko is Yoko Ono, directed by Kevin MacDonald, one of the most important documentary filmmaker in the UK, together with Sam Rice Edwards. It is a pleasure to host this movie in Venice. It starts from archival audio and video materials and reconstructs the formidable New York years of John Lennon and Yoko Ono, making the film a fascinating reinterpretation of the musical and political history of the United States of America of that period. Then we have Separated, the new documentary by Errol Morris, who was in Venice several times. He's one of the most important documentary filmmakers. He returns to Venice with a short but always sharp documentary that reconstructs the incredible story of the separation of the children of illegal immigrants from their parents, subtly imposed by the Trump administration, which was opposed by some heads of the offices in charge. And then we have this very peculiar project. We hesitated a lot. It lasts for more than 200 minutes. It is an editing film that collects in chronological order many of the journalistic reports aired by the Swedish TV since its creation in 1958 until 1989. It pursues the most complete objectivity possible, and the result is an impressive summary of the history of relations in the unresolved Israeli-Palestinian conflict. which in these days takes on an even greater significance. Russians at War is a documentary by a young Russian filmmaker, Anastasia Trifomova, who managed to be accepted on the Russian front into a medical unit without an official accreditation. She stayed with a group of physicians and health carers at the Russian front. She stayed for them for a whole year, collecting testimonies from soldiers who went from uncritical adherence to patriotic motivations to total disillusionment. She looked for the bodies of the dead. The most interesting thing is following her shift from an acritical support by these soldiers to the patriotic motivations of Russian propaganda to a total disillusionment after experiencing firsthand the senselessness of the conflict and the falsehood of Russian propaganda. To edit the footage, the director then had to find hospitality first in Canada, then in France, where she is currently located, a precious document precisely because it is authentic and it is not manipulative. It comes from the Russian side of the Russian-Ukrainian conflict. What is singular in a festival is that films often talk to one another. This, for example, we have just heard of a movie on the Russian front, and here we had instead a documentary that was shot in Ukraine during 1 year of conflict. The movie, I'm going on with this, Songs of Slow Burning Earth. In this case, the author is a young documentary filmmaker who dialogues with her Russian counterpart. Only this time we are on the right side of the conflict, shown through a series of key situations marked over the course of a year, which show how war creeps into everyday life to destroy it, to the point of imposing itself as a tragic routine. Two films that should be shown together with all those who talk about this absurd war only in terms of political and ideological conflict. And I go back to where I stopped before. Also, this movie is a dialogue with another movie. I mentioned One-to-One, the documentary on Yoko Ono and John Lennon. Again, a documentary on the Beatles. The Romanian director, Andrei Ujița, he worked with archive material. He focused on the first American tournée of the Beatles before the stay in New York of John Lennon and Yoko Ono. The first great concert of the Beatles in the U.S. is just a pretext for a political and cultural analysis of those years. So these two movies create a dialogue about America in the 1950s and 60s. Riefenstahl is a documentary by a German director, Andreas Weil. It is devoted to one of the most influential directors in the history of cinema, trying to shed light on the role and on the awareness of Riefenstahl about the propaganda of the Nazi regime her movies described. But it is also a reflection on Germany's unresolved contradictions in relation to its Nazi past, and more in general on the responsibility of artists with respect to the times in which they live and act. This is the section non-fiction. Let us now examine out of competition fiction. The opening film is Beetlejuice, Beetlejuice by Tim Burton, who returns to his creative origins, one of his most iconic characters, an explosion of colors, rhythm, and inventions with a great cast. They will all be in Venice. Michael Keaton, Winona Ryder, Catherine O'Hara, Justin Theroux, Monica Bellucci, Jenny Ortega, William Dafoe. A great red carpet for the opening of the 81st International Film Festival. The closing movie instead is the latest film by Pupi Avati, L'Orto Americano, a Gothic novel with historical references. We are in the years immediately after the Second World War, but also with supernatural elements, as other movies by Pupi Avati. I'm not telling you anything about the story. Also in this case, an exceptional cast. Filippo Scotti, the interpreter of the movie by Sorrentino, La mano di Dio, è stata la mano di Dio. Rita Tashingham, unforgotten interpreter of Dr. Zivago. And then Roberto De Francesco, Chiara Caselli, and many others. In alphabetical order, out of competition, fiction, Il tempo che ci vuole, The Time It Takes, by Francesca Comencini. This is perhaps the most personal film by Francesca Comencini. It is the autobiographical story of a relationship with a father with whom Francesca had shared a passion for cinema since she was a child. The personal story develops against the background of a dramatic events of the years of terrorism in Italy, marked by the revolutionary illusions of many young people, by red and black terrorism, by the many massacres still partly unclarified, but it focuses above all on their relationship and on the efforts made by the father to save the daughter from the hell of drug addiction. Love Diaz doesn't need to be presented. He was in Venice other times. He was the Golden Lion in 2016. He also got an award with Orizzonti in 2020. He's coming back out of competition with his last work that lasts 4 hours, another fresco of a political and social emptiness. We see a former policeman who is tormented by phantosmia. This hallucination, this olfactory hallucination, phantosmia, haunts the protagonist with the memory of the many killings he was forced to carry out during his military career. You see, for each movie, we also signal the duration of the movie. In this case, Maldoror is a movie lasting 155 minutes. Many of the films in competition are longer than 2 hours. Check the duration of the movies. It will be difficult otherwise to follow the screenings. Maldoror is the latest movie by Fabrice Duvels, a Belgian director, an author of genre movies. This starts from a famous case. It draws inspiration from the famous case of the monster of Marcinelle, which in the 90s caused a scandal for the failure of the police and the judicial system, later reformed. They couldn't solve the kidnapping of children who were the victims of pedophile gangs. It starts from a thriller. There is a tense reconstruction of the investigation, the obsession with the investigations of a young policeman played by an extraordinary actor, Anthony Bajon, hindered by superiors and by the rivalry between the three police forces of the time, which contributed to slowing down and misleading the investigations. And then we have a surprise. Nobody could imagine that we would get a movie a few days before the end of the selection, the latest movie by Takeshi Kitano, a beloved director who is often at the Venice Film Festival. You won't find anything on the internet about this film. It is very short, only 60 minutes. I will not reveal anything about the story, but it is also an entertaining exercise in meta-cinema, especially for those who know and love Kitano's previous films. Coming back again, Harmony Korine. The title of the movie is Baby Invasion. His previous movie was in Venice last year at midnight. He has taken a difficult path, especially for the audience. It continues the exploration of the limits of the audiovisual language and the possible contamination with other languages and other aesthetics. The previous movies, Agrodrift, by the same author, really surprised many of the viewers at midnight. It had been shot with an infrared camera, which made us think of abstract painting, whereas others did think of micro games. But the result is disturbing, equally disturbing. Also, Kiyoshi Kurosawa has been in Venice many times. He's coming back with a movie, the title of which is Cloud. He's one of the most prolific Japanese directors of the recent decades, and he returns to revisit themes and narrations we are used at with the previous movies. He became a cult director among cinephiles all over the world. He's mixing tones and genre, a realistic approach at the beginning, a gangster drift in the second part, even some comic concessions, and then closing with a lyrical ending, a perfect midnight movie. Finalement, by Claude Lelouch, is the latest film by Claude Lelouch, and it is a summary of his whole cinema. It is almost a testament. It is nice, moving, interesting for the spectators. Lelouch was never a Venetian director, so it is a great pleasure for us to welcome him here with this movie that is a kind of summa estetica of cinema. I cannot tell you about this movie. It is full of situations and stories, but it is extremely lively. And clearly, it will be a great success with the public. And then we have this movie that was somehow announced months ago. It is the movie interpreted by Brad Pitt and George Clooney with the direction of John Watts, one of the best-known directors because of his Spider-Man. Brad Pitt and George Clooney are clearly are among the most beloved actors all over the world. They are forced to work together to cancel the traces of a high-ranking crime disappear. In addition to a lot of adrenaline, also a lot of irony and not a few winks to the films of the past. There are also two shorts that are out of competition. The first is by Marco Bellocchio, Se posso permettermi, If I can afford, Chapter 2. Every year, Marco Bellocchio organizes a summer festival in Bobbio at the end of July. And every year, he realizes a short film with the students that have taken part in his workshop. 2 years ago, he had directed Chapter 1 of this series, of this trilogy. The third chapter will be shot next year, Se posso permettermi. The second, I'm not telling you anything, you have to discover this. What is interesting is that Bellocchio convinced all the participants in the festival to be part of the short. Rocco Papaleo, Giorgia Fasce, Filippo Timi, Pier Giorgio Bellocchio, Fabrizio Gifuni, Edoardo Leo, and a very important cast. And we are instead watching a short movie. Another short movie, co-directed by Ali Cheverod-Wacher and JR. The title is Allegorie citadine. Allegorie cittadine, chiedo scusa. The idea for the film was born following the beautiful show Retour à la Caverne, commissioned to JR by the Opéra National de Paris to celebrate the renovation of Palais Garnier. Show and film are a variation on the theme of Plato's cave with fantastic and poetic results. We are almost at the end of this long description. We are at the competition, Venice 81, 21 titles, 2 less than last year. The first movie is the new feature film by Pedro Almodovar, the first movie by Almodovar shot in English, his first language film with an exceptional cast, Julianne Moore, Tilda Swinton, John Turturro, and Alessandro Nivola, and many others. Welcome return to Venice. I'm grateful to Pedro for hurrying up the editing stage in order to have the movie in Venice. And then we have Gianni Amelio, Campo di Battaglia, Battlefield. Amelio has been in Venice many times. It takes place, it is set in the last year of the First World War, the year of the defeat of Caporetto, but also the year of the even greater defeat due to the spread of the first modern pandemic, the one that went down in history with the name of the Spanish flu, which caused many more deaths than the military conflict. Alessandro Borghi and Gabriele Montesi are two military doctors, two inseparable friends, divided, however, by two opposing conceptions of their duty as soldiers. Les Enfants après eux is the first of the three French cinema movies. It was developed by two twin brothers from France, Ludovic and Zoran Boukerma. This is the third film they make together, and it is based on the novel of the same name, Prix Goncourt, by Nicolas Mathieu. It is the choral story of a group of young teenagers in a remote valley of eastern France in the 90s. Again, a coming of age that finds the cadences of a great popular tale, turbulent and exciting, where there is no room for love, where there is room for love, friendship, rivalry, disagreement with the father, the small drugstore, and the lost illusion of the province. They are a real promise for French cinema. Then we have The Brutalist by Bradley Corbett, again, 215 minutes of duration, the most ambitious movie by Brad Corbett, who was in Venice with the two previous films. It is a shot in 70 millimeters film, and so it will be projected like this. It will be screened like this. It is the story of it is both a fictionary and a real story, the story of an Hungarian Jew who survived Auschwitz, not at all inclined to compromise. After emigrating to the United States, he lived the first few years in extreme poverty until he met a patron who entrusted him with a gigantic project. The thematic reference is the Fountainhead by King Vidor, a film with Cary Cooper fighting as an architect against the conservatism of the architectural establishment of the time, something we find in this movie as well. A great cast with Adrian Brody in the role of the protagonist, Felicity Jones as his wife, and then again Alessandro Nivola and Guy Pearce and many others. We have then Jouer avec le feu, The Quiet Son, the second French film in competition. It was co-directed by two sisters, Delphine and Muriel Coulin. It is their third work. It is also based on a novel that deals with a theme that could not be more topical. A single 50-year-old father, played by Vincent Landon, one of the most important French actors, has to deal with the opposite paths taken by his two sons, to whom he's very close. One is balanced and studious. The other is fascinated by a group of violent right-wing extremists, played by Benjamin Voisin, who was in Venice with his series last year. Vermiglio is the second Italian movie in competition by Maura Del Pero. She had made her name known for her with her debut movie, Maternal. 5 years later, she's coming to Venice with a film that will surprise you. It surprised us. Set in a small village in the Dolomites, Vermiglio, the extreme border with Austria. It is set in the years that precede the Second World War. There are just a few professional actors, among whom Tommaso Ragno, Martina Scrinzi, Giuseppe De Domenico, Roberto Novelli, and many others, but instead There are many non-professional actors, both children and adults of those valleys, of those countries, in a film whose direct reference in aesthetic terms is Albero degli Zoccoli by Ermanno Olmi. It reconstructs the life in a mountain village with the expectation for the coming back of those who fought the war. It seems to be the reincarnation of Ermanno Olmi in Maura del Pero. The third Italian movie in competition is Iddu by Fabio Grassadonia and Antonio Piazza. The third film by the directorial duo. There are many directorial duos this year. They were launched by Cannes Semaine de la Critique. It is their first film in competition at Venice. The story, told in a more farcical than realistic key, is remotely inspired by the story of Matteo Messina Denaro, the last major mafia fugitive arrested only in January 2023 and disappeared of illness 8 months later after his capture. Elio Germano is the fugitive known as Iddu, obsessed with the father figure and imprisoned in a secret apartment run by Barbara Bobulova, while Tony Servillo is the supporter who lends himself to an unclear attempt to discover his hiding place. Fourth Italian movie in competition. They are close to one another because of the alphabetical order. Luca Guadagnino with The Queer, 151 minutes. The novel it is taken from was written by William Burroughs between 1951 and 1953, although it was published only in 1985. And it is the book that Luca Guadagnino would have liked to bring to the screen. He has succeeded now, thanks to the fact that Daniel Craig has agreed to put himself on the line in an unusual role for him, realizing the interpretation of his life, I would say. It is all shot in Cinecittà, where the entire neighborhood of Mexico City was reconstructed with a few real exteriors stolen from Sicily and some remote areas of Mexico, a huge production effort for Italian cinema, a film of great international ambitions, shot in English, without sacrificing a single milligram of the rigor and creativity of a director we know very well. From Norway, there are not many Norwegian movies in competition. There haven't been many Norwegian films in competition. The title of this movie is Love, the third chapter of a trilogy. The director is Dag Johan Haugerud, whose the name of the trilogy is Sex, Dream, and Love. The first chapter was in Berlin last year. The second, I don't know where it will be screened, and the third will be here in Venice. The three films have in common the analysis of sexual behaviors that contrast with social norms and conventions. In particular, Love questions the disparity of social expectations toward the so-called sexual freedom of women in relation to that of men, and in particular of homosexuals. It is extremely explicit. That is quite unusual for us. The director has written his film. There is a narrative nature in these movies. Much expected movie by the cinephiles, April by Dea Kurumba Begasvili, a Georgian director. With her first film, she won the the film festival in San Sebastian in 2020, beginning. With her usual rigorous style, made of long sequence shots, subjective and off-screen takings, it tells the story of a midwife of a rural hospital in Georgia who lends herself for ideal and humanitarian reasons to perform clandestine abortions in a country that considers them illegal. The Order is an American movie by Justin Kurzel. He's an Australian director, but he works for independent American cinema. It is a political thriller inspired by a book that reconstructs the events of a group of white supremacists in the 80s. You can easily find a feeling with the years of terrorism. A group of white supremacists who financed terrorist acts with robberies, with the ambition of preparing a real conservative revolution. Jude Law is the FBI agent who begins to investigate the group with the help of a young local policeman, Ty Sheridan. He won in Venice the Mastroianni Award a few years ago. Pablo Larraín, we had his movies in the last few years. He's back with a movie dedicated to Maria Callas. Maybe this concludes the cycle of portraits of famous characters who have marked recent history: Neruda, Jackie, Princess Diana, Pinochet. Larraín faces in this movie the last days of the golden exile of Maria Callas in Paris. He relies on the impressive performance by Angelina Jolie. The cast also includes Pierfrancesco Favino and Alba Rohrwacher in the role of two faithful servants who remained close to Callas until the end. Trois Amis, the third French movie in competition. Mouret, the director, Mouret had never been in Venice before. He's much loved by French critics, little known in Italy. This is a movie that I wanted in competition in Venice. It is the story of three women and their love affairs that intersect and intertwine in a sort of ronde between Rohmer and Woody Allen, but also, of course, referring to the great tradition that dates back to Marivaux, Diderot, and Laclos. A comedy with the appearance of lightness that says a lot about the fleetingness of modern love feelings. From Argentina, we have Kill the Jockey, the new movie by Luis Ortega, who is considered one of the most original voices in contemporary Argentine cinema. The latest film brings together a great cast of South American actors. The cinematographer is the same as Kaurismäki, and it tells the story, a little surreal, a little grotesque, in any case never realistic, of Argentina's greatest jockey who races for a mafia boss, drinks too much, causes a lot of trouble, is jailed, and in the end changes sex. That's it. That's all I have to say. Joker, Folie à deux, what can I add? Everything has already been anticipated. The second chapter, Folie à deux, by Todd Phillips, with the complicity of his co-screenwriters, Scott Silver and Bob Kahn, confirming himself as one of the most original directors. You have seen probably the trailer of the movie on the web. I will not tell you anything about that because nobody can imagine what Todd and his screenwriters have imagined to tell the story of Joaquin Phoenix in the criminal hospital, in the criminal asylum where he's locked up with Lady Gaga awaiting trial. Everything is unexpected, including the interpretation of Joaquin Phoenix, who is really incredible in his performance. And Todd Phillips is one of the most original authors in contemporary American cinema. Another American movie by a Dutch origin director, Halina Reijn, Baby Girl, interpreted by Nicole Kidman, the second collaboration of this Dutch director with the American production and distribution company A24. The film is an erotic thriller starring Nicole Kidman. A successful but sexually dissatisfied manager seeks comfort in a sadomasochistic relationship with a young apprentice, risking her career and her family. 12 years after his last film, after his previous film, we have Walter Salles back in Venice. Ainda estou aqui, I'm still here, is the title, inspired by a book that tells the true story of the anxious search carried out by the wife of a former socialist deputy, arrested and disappeared by the police during the Brazilian military dictatorship in the early 70s. A great interpretation by Fernanda Torres, one of the greatest artists of our generation, an actress, a writer, a screenwriter. And the movie also has an autobiographic dimension because Walter Salles, who was a friend of the deputy's daughters and family, signs perhaps his most beautiful film. Certainly, this is the most emotional and personal movie by this director. Fifth and last Italian movie in competition in Venice is the second movie by Julia Steigerwald, Diva Futura. It is the confirmation of what could already be glimpsed in her first film, Settembre, which only the pandemic prevented from being a success with the general public to which her films aspire. And that is the search for the right language to tell a story of wide appeal, not just for a niche group of viewers. In this case, it is the story of a character who revolutionized, for better or for worse, the customs and the behavior of our country. That Riccardo Schicchi, who first introduced porn cinema in Italy. From now on, Schicchi will have the face of Pietro Castellitto, who confirms himself as a versatile and very intelligent actor, and is surrounded by a lot of talented actresses who embody the stars of the time, who went down in history: Cicciolina, Mona Pozzi, Eva Enger. A pop movie. I think that the authors do not refuse this definition. Atina Rachel Sangari comes back to Venice after many years. She was here with the second movie that won the Best Actress Award in 2011. This is a fourth movie. The starting point is a novel by the same name by Jim Craze, set in a remote village in the English countryside at the end of the 16th century. That is to say, on the eve of the agricultural revolution, when the land was a collective asset passed under the legal control of the landowners. The protagonist is Caleb Landry Jones, fresh from the wonderful interpretation of Luc Besson's film Dogman. It should be emphasized that the film was shot in 60 millimeters, and the grain that can be seen contributes to the impression of reality, of a meticulous reconstruction of environments and atmospheres of the time. We are coming to the end with the last two movies of the official competition. Wang Bing, the greatest documentary filmmaker in activity in China, brings the last chapter of a trilogy to Venice. Youth subtitle is Homecoming, because if in the first two chapters he had spent a whole year with a group of young textile workers who moved from their rural villages to work in city factories, this last chapter goes backwards after the bankruptcy of the place they were working in. They return home after being exploited and employed, and at home they find the roots they came from. A long movie, not as long as other movies by Wang Bing, 152 minutes. Last movie in the selection, and the first time, I think, for a movie from Singapore in Venice, Stranger Eyes by Yeo Si-hwa. I hope I pronounce his name correctly. The director is not a stranger because his second feature film won at Locarno in 2018. The title was A Land Imagined. This new work is a layered work that lends itself to several readings. A metalinguistic excursion on cinema in which one can hear the echo of Hitchcock's film A Rear Window, but also a hidden denunciation of a country under the eye of surveillance cameras, also a reflection on the notion of family. In short, a more complex work than it appears at first glance, beyond a well-oiled yellow mechanism, thriller mechanism on truth and voyeurism. These are the movies in the selection of this year before leaving you and seeing you at the end of August. Allow me to recall that there are many long movies. I am working at the agenda. Many of the most expected movies will be in the second part of the festival, towards the end of the film festival. Allow me to thank a lot of people. I would like to thank all the authors, directors, production companies, and sales agents who have collaborated with the Venice Film Festival this year, including, of course, those whose films could not make it onto the still too short list of invited films. Heartily felt and dutiful thanks to Andrea Del Mercato and Deborah Rossi. I put the two names together. The pillars that support the delicate but prestigious building of La Biennale di Venezia. A very special thanks to my assistant. I couldn't work without Angela Savoldi, and the group of people who shared with me the joys, sorrows, and responsibilities of the long film selection process. almost 9 months this year. I cannot mention them all, just as I cannot mention all the extraordinary people who work in the cinema office, without whom the fragile ship of the film festival would never reach its port. Thanks to Pascal Dio, the very effective head of the Venice Production Bridge, to Savina Neirotti, who leads Biennale College of Cinema with vision and passion. Thanks to Alessandra Speciale, who holds the string of Final Cut in Venice, and all the project that supports the movie that are being produced in Maghreb and the Middle East, and thanks to all those who in different ways have contributed to this film festival without me being able to name them all. Finally, last but not least, thanks to Paolo Lughi, who in all these years has supervised, guided, and protected my communications and the communications of the film festival at large. See you at the end of August for the festival.